The screech of tyres against asphalt pierced the afternoon stillness outside St. Catherine's private cardiology clinic. A man burst through the automatic doors, his 5-year-old son limp in his arms, the child's face an alarming shade of blue-grey. "Help! Please, somebody help!" Tyler Jones's voice cracked as he stumbled into the reception area, his son's small body barely moving with each laboured breath. "He just collapsed. We were at a barbecue and he just—" The receptionist's training kicked in immediately. She pressed the emergency button beneath her desk while grabbing the phone. "Code blue to emergency, code blue to emergency," she announced over the intercom, her voice steady despite the chaos. Within seconds, medical staff flooded the reception area. Dr. Martinez, the attending cardiologist, took one look at the unconscious child and began barking orders. "Get me a gurney now! Call respiratory therapy. I need an IV setup and cardiac monitoring." Tyler watched helplessly as his son was transferred to a stretcher, the medical team moving with practiced efficiency around the small form. The boy's chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance, his lips still tinged with that terrifying blue. "Sir, I need you to tell me exactly what happened," Dr. Martinez said, following the gurney toward the emergency treatment room. Every detail could be important. "We were at my brother's house," Tyler gasped, jogging alongside the stretcher. "Tommy was playing with his cousins in the backyard, running around, laughing. He seemed fine. Then we called everyone for lunch, and when I turned around, he was on the ground. He wasn't breathing properly. His lips—" Tyler's voice broke. His lips turned blue and then he just went limp. The emergency room doors swung shut, separating Tyler from his son. Through the glass windows, he could see the medical team working frantically, attaching monitors, inserting IVs, adjusting the ventilator that was now breathing for Tommy. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided a fragile lifeline of hope. Dr. Martinez emerged after what felt like hours but had been only 20 minutes. His expression was grave. "Mr. Jones, your son is stable for now, but his condition is critical. We're seeing signs of severe cardiac distress. Has Tommy ever had heart problems before?" Tyler nodded, running his hands through his hair. "He was born with a congenital heart defect. He's had 2 surgeries already, but the doctors said he was doing well. The last checkup was just 3 months ago, and they said his heart was functioning better than they'd hoped." "I need to call in our head of cardiothoracic surgery," Dr. Martinez said. "This is beyond what we can handle with standard treatment. Dr. Hill is the best we have, but—" "Call her," Tyler interrupted, desperation bleeding through his voice. "I don't care what it costs. Just call her." Dr. Martinez nodded and stepped away to make the call. Tyler slumped onto a nearby bench, his head in his hands, as the weight of the moment crashed over him. Tommy was all he had left in this world. After the divorce, after his ex-wife had moved across the country, it had been just the 2 of them against everything. The boy was his redemption, his reason for becoming a better man than he'd been in his younger years. 40 miles away, Dr. Olivia Hill stood in her apartment, checking her luggage one final time. The medical conference in Chicago would be her first vacation in over a year, and she was looking forward to 3 days of lectures that didn't involve life-or-death decisions. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Dr. Hill. She answered on the second ring, already knowing that the call meant her carefully planned departure was in jeopardy. "Doctor, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a critical situation here." Dr. Martinez's voice was tight with urgency. 5-year-old male, congenital heart defect, acute cardiac distress. He collapsed suddenly, and his vitals are barely stable even with full support. I've never seen anything quite like this presentation. Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the familiar pull of duty override her personal plans. What's his history? 2 previous cardiac surgeries, last one 18 months ago. Father says recent checkups showed improvement, but something's gone wrong. His oxygen saturation is hovering around 70% despite maximum ventilatory support, and his cardiac output is dropping steadily. She was already moving toward her closet, trading her travel clothes for scrubs. "ETA? How soon can you get here?" Olivia glanced at her suitcase. Then at the plane ticket on her dresser. 20 minutes. She hung up and immediately dialed the airline, cancelling her flight while grabbing her keys. The Chicago conference would have to wait. Right now, somewhere across town, a 5-year-old was fighting for his life. The drive to the clinic passed in a blur of traffic lights and racing thoughts. Congenital heart defects in young children were her specialty, but sudden deterioration in previously stable patients always presented unique challenges. Each case was a puzzle, and she'd built her reputation on solving the ones others couldn't. St. Catherine's parking garage had never seemed so vast as she hurried from her car to the elevator. The emergency department buzzed with controlled chaos when she arrived, her presence immediately shifting the energy in the room. Nurses and residents stepped aside as she made her way to the treatment room where Tommy lay surrounded by machines. "Give me the full rundown," she said to Dr. Martinez, her eyes never leaving the monitors displaying the child's vital signs. Tommy Jones, age 5, history of hyperplastic left heart syndrome. He's undergone 2 staged procedures. Norwood at 3 days old, Glenn at 6 months. Last cardiac catheterization showed good Fontan candidacy, procedure scheduled for next year. Today he collapsed during a family gathering, presenting with cyanosis, respiratory distress, and cardiovascular compromise. Olivia nodded, processing the information while examining the unconscious child. His small face was peaceful despite the ventilator tube, dark eyelashes resting against pale cheeks. Something about the shape of his features nagged at her, a familiarity she couldn't place. "Where's the father?" "In the waiting area. He's been asking about you since we mentioned calling in a specialist." "I'll speak with him after I review the imaging. Get me his previous surgical records and set up for an emergency cardiac catheterization. If this is what I think it is, we're going to need the OR prepped within the hour." The next 15 minutes were spent poring over Tommy's medical history, previous surgical reports, and current diagnostic images. The picture that emerged was troubling, what appeared to be a sudden occlusion in one of the critical vessels that supplied blood flow in his complex cardiac anatomy. Without immediate intervention, the child would not survive the night. Olivia stepped out of the treatment room, pulling off her gloves. In the waiting area, she could see a man hunched over on a bench, his shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. She approached him, her mind already formulating how to explain the complexity of what lay ahead. "Mr. Jones?" The man looked up, and the world tilted beneath Olivia's feet. Time collapsed, carrying her back 15 years to a dark alley, to hands that grabbed and held, to a voice that said she knew exactly what he wanted. The face had aged, carried lines of worry and responsibility that hadn't been there before, but the eyes were unmistakable. Tyler Jones, the man who had changed the trajectory of her entire life in a single night of violence. Tyler's eyes widened with recognition, a sharp intake of breath betraying his shock. For a moment, neither of them moved, the weight of their shared history filling the space between them like a toxic fog. But Olivia had spent 15 years becoming someone who could function under pressure, who could separate personal trauma from professional duty. She straightened her shoulders and stepped closer, her voice steady and clinical. "Mr. Jones, I'm Dr. Hill. I need to discuss your son's condition with you." Tyler searched her face desperately, looking for any sign that she remembered that this moment was as earth-shattering for her as it was for him. But Olivia's expression remained professionally neutral, her focus apparently entirely on the medical situation at hand. Is Tommy going to be okay?" Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper. "Your son has a very serious condition. The blood flow through his reconstructed heart has been compromised, likely due to a clot or stenosis in one of the key vessels. He needs immediate surgery, one of the most complex procedures we perform. The operation will take several hours, and I won't lie to you about the risks involved." Tyler's hands trembled as he processed her words. "But you can save him? You can fix this?" Olivia looked at him directly for the first time, her dark eyes meeting his. In that moment, Tyler saw something flicker across her features, a brief crack in her professional armor that told him she knew exactly who he was. "Mr. Jones," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that had nothing to do with medicine. "Your son's condition has nothing to do with anything that happened in the past. He's an innocent child who deserves every chance at life. You don't need to worry about that." The words hit Tyler like a physical blow. She remembered. She knew exactly who he was, and yet she was still here, still willing to fight for his son's life. The magnitude of her professionalism, her ability to separate his past actions from Tommy's needs, left him speechless. Before he could respond, Olivia turned and began walking back toward the treatment area. "We'll be taking him to surgery within the next 30 minutes. A nurse will give you the consent forms and explain what to expect. This will be a long night, Mr. Jones." Tyler watched her retreating form, seeing in her confident stride the successful surgeon she'd become, so different from the frightened young woman he'd encountered all those years ago. As the treatment room doors closed behind her, he was left alone with the crushing weight of recognition and the desperate hope that the woman he'd once hurt so deeply would now be the one to save what mattered most to him in the world. Inside the treatment room, Olivia leaned against the wall for just a moment, allowing herself to feel the tremor in her hands before pushing it down. She had work to do. A child's life hung in the balance, and 15 years of professional excellence hadn't been built by allowing personal demons to interfere with patient care. But as she began preparing for the most challenging surgery of her career, she couldn't shake the bitter irony that fate had placed Tommy Jones's life in her hands, the son of the man who had haunted her dreams and driven her to become the surgeon she was today. The operating room beckoned, sterile and bright, where the past would have to wait while she fought to save the future of an innocent child. The OR preparation room hummed with controlled activity as Olivia scrubbed her hands with methodical precision. Each movement was automatic, muscle memory built over thousands of surgeries, but her mind was fracturing between the present moment and a night 15 years ago that had changed everything. "Focus," she commanded herself, watching the antiseptic solution foam between her fingers. "Tommy Jones is your patient. Nothing else matters right now." But even as she repeated the mantra, memories crashed over her like waves against a crumbling seawall. 15 years earlier, the campus library had been Olivia's sanctuary, a place where the pre-med textbooks made sense and her future felt attainable. At 22, she was older than most of her classmates, having worked for 3 years after high school to save money for college. Every dollar mattered when you were supporting yourself and helping care for a blind grandmother. Her part-time job at the campus bookstore paid barely above minimum wage, but it was work she could do between classes. That Thursday evening in October, she'd stayed late doing inventory, not finishing until nearly 10 o'clock. The campus was quiet, most students either studying or already out at parties. Olivia had taken the shortcut through the academic quad dozens of times, but something felt different that night. Maybe it was the broken streetlight near the chemistry building, or the way the autumn wind carried sounds strangely. When she saw the 3 figures walking toward her from the direction of the fraternity houses, instinct told her to change course. She turned down a narrow passage between buildings, thinking it would lead to the main campus road. Instead, it dead-ended at a maintenance area, trash dumpsters forming walls on either side. By the time she realized her mistake, it was too late. "Well, well, look what we found," the voice came from behind her. Tyler Jones stepped into the alley opening, blocking her escape route. Even in the dim light, she could see his confident smile, the kind that came from never having been told no by anyone who mattered. His 2 friends flanked him. She recognized one as his fraternity brother, Kevin, from her statistics class. "Please," Olivia said, backing toward the brick wall. "I just want to go home." "Oh, we know what you want," Tyler said, moving closer. "You've been watching us in the student union, haven't you? Following us around campus." I don't know what you're talking about. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Don't play dumb. Girls like you always want guys like me. You're just too shy to ask for it. The words hit her like a slap. That's not true. I've never... Sure you have. Tyler's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. And tonight's your lucky night. What followed was a blur of terror and helplessness. Her dress, the blue one her grandmother had sewn for her 20th birthday, tore when she tried to pull away. The rough brick wall scraped her back. Voices telling her to stop fighting, to just accept what was happening. The smell of beer and cologne and something else, something that would make her nauseous for years afterward. When it was over, they left her crumpled against the dumpster, alone and broken. The walk home took forever. Her grandmother's house was only 6 blocks from campus, but every shadow seemed to hide another threat. By the time she reached the front porch, she'd managed to wrap her coat around the worst of the damage to her dress. Olivia? Is that you, dear? Wendy's voice came from the living room where she sat listening to the late-night radio program. Yes, Grandma. I'm home. You're later than usual. Everything all right? Olivia paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking at her grandmother's gentle face. Wendy had raised her since she was 12, never complaining about the burden, never making her feel unwanted after her parents died. How could she add this trauma to an old woman's worries? Just had to work late. I'm going to bed now. In her room, Olivia sat on the edge of her narrow bed and stared at her reflection in the dresser mirror. The girl looking back seemed like a stranger, hair dishevelled, makeup smeared, a bruise already forming on her cheek. She pulled the ruined dress over her head and stuffed it into the back of her closet, then stepped into the shower and scrubbed her skin until it was raw. That night, she cried silently into her pillow, muffling the sound so her grandmother wouldn't hear. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of normalcy that felt surreal. She attended classes, worked her shifts at the bookstore, studied for exams. On the surface, nothing had changed, but inside she felt like she was slowly drowning. Sleep became elusive. Every unexpected sound made her jump. She found herself taking longer routes across campus to avoid the spots where she might encounter Tyler and his friends. When she did see them from a distance, laughing with their fraternity brothers, flirting with sorority girls, they seemed completely unaffected, as if that night had meant nothing at all. 2 weeks later, Wendy cornered her in the kitchen. Olivia, sit down. I need to study for my organic chemistry exam. Sit down. Her grandmother's voice carried the authority that came from decades of teaching elementary school. Something's wrong, and don't try to tell me otherwise. I may be blind, but I'm not deaf. You've been crying yourself to sleep every night. Olivia sank into the kitchen chair, her defences crumbling. Grandma. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. We always have. The story came out in broken fragments. The walk home, the alley, the 3 boys who thought they could take whatever they wanted. Wendy listened without interruption, her weathered hands clasped tightly in her lap. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered when Olivia finished. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I was ashamed. Because I thought maybe it was my fault somehow. Because I didn't want you to worry. It was not your fault, Wendy said firmly, and we're going to the police first thing tomorrow morning. Grandma, no. You don't understand. One of them, Tyler Jones, his uncle is chief of police. Chief Jones has been running this town for 20 years. Nobody crosses him. Then we'll go to the state police, or the FBI, or whoever we need to go to. But Olivia knew better. In a town of 15,000 people, the Jones family name carried weight. Tyler's uncle wasn't just the police chief. His cousins worked in the prosecutor's office. His brother-in-law was on the city council. It was a web of influence that had protected the family for generations. Still, she let Wendy convince her to try. The police station felt like walking into enemy territory. Officer Patricia Manning, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and greying temples, took Olivia's statement with professional compassion. She didn't ask the questions Olivia had dreaded. Why she'd waited so long to report it, what she'd been wearing, whether she'd been drinking. I'm going to be honest with you, Officer Manning said when Olivia finished. Cases like this are difficult to prosecute under the best circumstances. The delay in reporting makes it harder, but not impossible. The fact that you know your attackers actually helps. One of them is Tyler Jones. Officer Manning's pen stopped moving across the paper. She looked up sharply. Tyler Jones? As in Chief Jones's nephew? Yes. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Officer Manning cleared her throat. I'll need to discuss this with my supervisor. We'll investigate thoroughly, of course, but... She didn't finish the sentence, but Olivia heard the unspoken warning. That evening, the phone rang during dinner. Wendy answered, her expression growing troubled as she listened. No one there, she said, hanging up. Third time today. The calls continued for the next week, sometimes silent, sometimes with muffled threats that were too vague to be traced, but clear enough to be understood. Drop the charges. Forget what happened. Keep your mouth shut or things will get worse. Then Officer Manning called with news that surprised no one who knew how the town worked. The prosecutor's office has declined to pursue charges, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Insufficient evidence. The suspects all have alibis from their fraternity brothers. Of course they do, Olivia said. I'm sorry, I wish I could do more. That night, the phone rang at 2 in the morning. This time, the voice on the other end was clear and direct. You have 24 hours to withdraw your complaint and leave town, the caller said. If you don't, we'll burn your house down with you and the old lady inside. Try us. Olivia hung up with shaking hands. She found Wendy sitting up in bed, her face pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. We heard, her grandmother said quietly. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry I brought this on us. You didn't bring anything on us. Evil men did this. Wendy reached for her hand. They left town 3 days later, driving west in Wendy's ancient Buick with everything they owned packed into the trunk and back seat. Olivia had withdrawn from school, forfeiting a semester's tuition they couldn't afford to lose. But staying would have meant living in fear, and Wendy deserved better in her final years. They settled in a mid-sized city 2 states away, where Olivia found work as a nursing assistant while Wendy's health began its slow decline. The old woman never complained about being uprooted from the only home she'd known for 60 years, never made Olivia feel guilty for the choices they'd had to make. Sometimes running away is the bravest thing you can do, Wendy said during one of their quiet evening conversations. You're not giving up. You're giving yourself a chance to heal and grow stronger. For 2 years, Olivia worked double shifts at the hospital, caring for patients during the day and her grandmother at night. When Wendy's diabetes finally claimed her sight completely, then her mobility, then her life, Olivia was there holding her hand. I'm proud of who you've become, Wendy whispered in her final moments. Promise me you won't let what happened to you define your whole life. Promise me you'll do something wonderful with the strength you've found. 3 weeks after the funeral, Olivia walked into the admissions office of the State University's medical school. Dr. Hill, we're ready for you. The OR nurse's voice pulled Olivia back to the present. She entered the surgical suite where Tommy Jones lay unconscious on the table, his small chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. The team had already begun the preliminary work. 4 lines established, monitoring equipment attached, surgical site prepped and draped. Talk to me about what we're looking at, Olivia said, stepping up to the table. Dr. Martinez pointed to the imaging display. The catheterization confirmed our suspicions. Complete occlusion of the conduit between his right ventricle and pulmonary artery. Blood flow to his lungs has been severely compromised. Olivia studied the images, her trained eye tracing the complex anatomy that previous surgeries had created. Tommy's heart was a roadmap of medical intervention, scars from multiple procedures, artificial vessels, and reconstructed chambers that allowed him to live with a condition that would have been fatal just decades earlier. How long has he been like this? Hard to say exactly. The occlusion probably developed gradually over several weeks, but the acute symptoms only started today. Time is critical then. His body's been compensating, but that compensation is failing. Olivia looked around the room at her surgical team, people she'd worked with for years, who trusted her judgment implicitly. This is going to be delicate work. We'll need to remove the clot and possibly replace the entire conduit. Dr. Chen, I want you on pump. Sarah, make sure we have conduits available in sizes 12 and 14 millimeters. The team moved with practiced efficiency, each member focused on their role in the complex choreography of cardiac surgery. But as Olivia made her first incision, her mind drifted again to the man waiting in the surgical lounge, the man whose life had intersected with hers in the most devastating way possible. 20 minutes into the surgery, the heart-lung machine took over Tommy's circulation, allowing Olivia to work on the still heart. What she found was worse than the imaging had suggested. "There's significant scarring around the conduit," she reported to the room. "More than we expected from his previous surgeries. This is going to require complete reconstruction of the outflow tract." It was delicate work, requiring the steady hands and absolute focus that had made her reputation. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and Tyler Jones would lose his son. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had taken so much from her now depended entirely on her skill and professionalism to preserve what he loved most. As she worked, memories continued to surface like fragments of a fever dream. 5 years earlier, Dr. Olivia Hill had been at St. Catherine's for only 6 months when the first pediatric case arrived that would define her career. A newborn with the same condition Tommy had been born with, hyperplastic left heart syndrome. The baby's parents were young, terrified, facing the reality that their child would need multiple surgeries and might not survive to his first birthday. "The good news," Olivia had told them during that first consultation, "is that the surgical techniques for treating this condition have improved dramatically. Children who wouldn't have survived 20 years ago are now going to college, getting married, having families of their own." She'd performed the baby's first surgery herself, then the second, then the third. Each procedure was successful, each recovery a small miracle. Watching that child grow and thrive had confirmed what Olivia already knew. This was her calling. Helping children overcome the cardiovascular challenges they were born with gave her a sense of purpose that transcended her own trauma. Over the years, she'd built a reputation as one of the premier pediatric cardiac surgeons in the region. Families travelled hundreds of miles to seek her expertise. Medical students competed for the chance to observe her surgeries. She'd published papers, spoken at conferences, and mentored a new generation of surgeons. But she'd never married, never had children of her own. Colleagues assumed she was too dedicated to her career, too focused on her patients to make room for a personal life. The truth was more complicated. The trauma of that night 15 years ago had left invisible scars that never fully healed. She'd learned to function, to excel, to help others. But intimate relationships remained difficult. Trust a fragile commodity she couldn't easily extend. Her patients became her family, their recoveries her greatest joy. In the surgical suite, she felt whole and powerful, able to fix what was broken and give hope where there had been none. It was enough. It had to be enough. "Suction here," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the complexity of what she was attempting. "I need better visualization of the pulmonary arteries." The surgery had been underway for 3 hours. Tommy's new conduit was in place, but the connections required absolute precision. One leak, one imperfect suture line, and the child would be back in crisis within days. "How are his numbers, doctor?" "Chen?" "Stable. Blood pressure holding steady. Oxygen saturation good." Olivia nodded, making the final stitches that would determine whether Tommy Jones would have a chance at a normal childhood. As she worked, she thought about the waiting room where Tyler sat, probably staring at the clock, measuring his son's life in minutes and hours. She wondered what kind of father he'd become. The Tyler she remembered had been arrogant, entitled, someone who took what he wanted without considering the consequences. But people could change, especially when they had something precious to protect. The desperate love she'd seen in his eyes when he carried his son into the clinic suggested a man transformed by responsibility and loss. "Beginning separation from bypass," she announced. "Let's see how this heart wants to work on its own." The critical moment in any cardiac surgery was when the heart-lung machine was turned off and the patient's own heart had to take over. Olivia watched the monitors intently as Tommy's reconstructed heart began to beat independently, pumping blood through the new pathways she'd created. "Rhythm looks good," Dr. Chen reported. "Pressures are stabilizing nicely." Olivia allowed herself a small smile. "Close him up, doctor." "Martinez, I think we've done good work tonight." As the surgical team began the process of closing Tommy's chest, Olivia stepped back from the table. The hardest part was over, but the real test would come in the hours and days that followed. She'd given Tyler Jones's son the best chance at life that modern medicine could provide. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. "I'll speak to the family," she said, pulling off her surgical gown. "Keep me updated on his progress through the night." The walk from the OR to the surgical waiting room felt like a journey between worlds. From the sterile perfection of the surgical suite to the raw emotion of families in crisis. Tyler was exactly where she'd expected to find him, alone on a corner couch, his head in his hands. "Mr. Jones?" He looked up immediately, his eyes searching her face for any sign of what news she carried. "The surgery went well," Olivia said, her voice carefully professional. "We were able to clear the obstruction and replace the damaged conduit. Tommy's heart is working properly now, and his vital signs are stable." The relief that washed over Tyler's face was so profound that for a moment, Olivia saw not the man who had hurt her, but simply a father who'd been given his child back. "Thank you," he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Thank you so much." He'll need several days in the ICU for monitoring, then another week or two for recovery. The next few days will be critical, but I'm optimistic about his prognosis. Tyler nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Can I see him?" "Once he's settled in the ICU, a nurse will come get you when he's ready for visitors." Olivia turned to leave, but Tyler's voice stopped her. "Dr. Hill?" She paused without turning around. "I know this situation is complicated, but what you did tonight, what you've done for Tommy, I can never repay that. Whatever you think of me, and you have every right to think the worst, I want you to know that I'm grateful. More grateful than I can possibly express." Olivia stood silent for a long moment, her back still to him. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Get some rest, Mr. Jones. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." As she walked away, Tyler watched her retreating figure and wondered if the woman who had just saved his son's life would ever be able to forgive the man who had once destroyed her sense of safety in the world. The weight of that question would hang over both of them in the difficult days ahead. The pediatric ICU was quieter than most hospital units, designed to minimize stress on small patients and their families. Soft lighting cast gentle shadows across the room where Tommy Jones lay surrounded by monitors and IV lines, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of recovery. 3 days had passed since the surgery. 3 days of Tyler maintaining a bedside vigil, reading stories to his unconscious son, talking to him about everything and nothing, baseball games they'd attend when he got better, the treehouse they'd build in the backyard, the fishing trip they'd planned for his 6th birthday. Olivia made her rounds twice daily, checking Tommy's progress with professional detachment, while Tyler watched her every movement. He never spoke directly to her unless she asked a medical question, but she could feel the weight of unfinished business hanging between them like a storm cloud. On the morning of the 4th day, Tommy's eyes fluttered open. "Daddy?" His voice was barely a whisper, scratchy from the ventilator tube that had been removed the previous evening. Tyler's face transformed with relief and joy. "Hey there, buddy. How are you feeling?" "Sleepy, and my chest hurts." "I know, son. but you're going to be okay now. The doctor fixed your heart. Tommy's eyes moved around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Are we in the hospital? Yes, but not for much longer. You're getting better every day. Dr. Martinez entered the room for the morning assessment, his smile broadening when he saw Tommy awake and alert. Well, look who decided to join us. How are you feeling, champ? As the medical team conducted their examination, Tyler stepped back and watched his son respond to their questions with typical 5-year-old curiosity. The colour had returned to Tommy's cheeks, and his oxygen levels were excellent. For the first time in months, Tyler allowed himself to believe that his son might actually have a normal childhood. Everything looks great, Doctor, Martinez announced after completing his assessment. Dr. Hill will want to see him this afternoon, but I think we can start talking about moving to a regular room tomorrow. When the medical team left, Tommy tugged on his father's sleeve. Daddy, I want to thank the doctor who saved me. What do you mean, buddy? The lady doctor. I heard the nurses talking. They said she did something really hard to fix my heart, and that's why I'm feeling better. Tyler's throat tightened. Her name is Dr. Hill. Can I see her? I want to say thank you. That afternoon, Olivia arrived for her daily check on Tommy's progress. She'd been encouraged by the reports from the nursing staff. All indicators pointed to a successful recovery. As she approached his room, she could hear the sound of quiet laughter. Dr. Hill! Tommy's voice was stronger now, animated in the way only children could be. Daddy said you're the one who fixed my heart. Olivia felt something shift inside her chest at the sight of Tommy sitting up in bed, a colouring book spread across his lap. He looked so much like his father at that age, the same dark hair, the same bright eyes, but there was an innocence in his expression that Tyler had lost long before their paths crossed. How are you feeling, Tommy? Much better. Look, I coloured this for you. He held up a drawing of what appeared to be a heart, coloured in bright red crayon with a yellow stethoscope around it. The nurse said doctors like pictures of hearts. Olivia accepted the drawing, studying the careful way he'd coloured inside the lines. This is beautiful, Tommy. Thank you. Daddy says you're the best heart doctor in the whole world. He says you saved my life. Tyler stood beside the bed, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Tommy wanted to thank you personally, Doctor. Hill, we're both very grateful for everything you've done. There was something in his tone, a weight that suggested he wasn't just talking about the surgery. Olivia found herself looking at him directly for the first time since that initial moment of recognition, seeing the lines of worry around his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking. I'm just glad you're feeling better, Tommy, she said. Your heart is working perfectly now. Will I be able to play soccer again? Daddy promised we could sign up for a team when I got bigger. I think soccer sounds like a wonderful idea, but let's get you home and fully recovered first, okay? As Olivia completed her examination, Tommy chatted about his plans for when he got out of the hospital, the ice cream his dad had promised him, the new video game they'd been saving for a special occasion, the way he was going to show all his friends his surgery scar. Dr. Hill? Tommy's voice took on the serious tone that children used when they had something important to say. My daddy told me that sometimes people do bad things when they're young, but they can become better people when they grow up. He said the most important thing is learning from your mistakes and trying to make up for them. Olivia's eyes flicked to Tyler, who had gone pale. That sounds like very wise advice, Tommy. Daddy says he made some big mistakes when he was younger, but that having me helped him become a better person. Is that true? Can people really change? The question hung in the air between them. Olivia looked at this innocent child, then at his father, seeing perhaps for the first time not the monster from her nightmares, but a man who had been genuinely transformed by love and responsibility. Yes, Tommy, she said quietly. I believe people can change, especially when they have someone important to change for. Tyler's eyes filled with tears at her words. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement of the possibility of redemption. "Dr. Hill," Tommy continued, "would you like to have dinner with us when I get out of the hospital? Daddy makes really good spaghetti, and I could show you my room and my toy cars." The invitation was so innocent, so genuine, that it took Olivia's breath away. She glanced at Tyler, who was shaking his head slightly, clearly mortified by his son's boldness. "That's very sweet of you to ask, Tommy, but I'm sure your dad wants to have you all to himself when you get home. You've both been through a lot." "But Daddy doesn't have very many friends," Tommy said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "And you saved my life. That makes you like family, doesn't it?" Before Olivia could respond, a nurse entered to administer Tommy's medications. "Time for your afternoon meds, sweetie. Then maybe a nap." "I don't want a nap," Tommy protested, but his eyelids were already heavy. "I'll check on you tomorrow," Olivia told him, tucking his drawing into her white coat. "Rest well." As she prepared to leave, Tyler cleared his throat. "Dr. Hill? Would it be possible to speak with you privately? Just for a moment?" Olivia hesitated, glancing at Tommy, who was already drifting off to sleep. "The family conference room down the hall. 5 minutes." The conference room was small and sterile, designed for delivering difficult news to families in crisis. Tyler closed the door behind them and stood awkwardly near the window, as if afraid to come too close. "I don't even know where to begin," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Then don't." Olivia's voice was steady, professional. "Your son is recovering well. That's all that matters." "No, it's not all that matters." Tyler turned to face her fully. "What I did to you, there's no excuse for it. There never was. I was young and drunk and entitled, and I thought I could take whatever I wanted. I destroyed your life, and I've had to live with that knowledge every day since." Olivia remained silent, her arms crossed, waiting. "I know this doesn't matter to you, but I need you to know that I'm not that person anymore. Having Tommy, losing his mother, watching him fight for his life, it changed me completely. The man who hurt you wouldn't have been capable of the kind of love I feel for my son." "You're right," Olivia said quietly. "It doesn't matter to me. Not really." Tyler flinched as if she'd struck him. "I understand. I wanted you to know." "What you did to me destroyed the person I was," Olivia continued, her voice gaining strength. "That frightened college student who just wanted to make it through school and take care of her grandmother, she died in that alley. You killed her as surely as if you'd used a weapon." Tyler's face crumpled. "I know. God, I know. But the person I became afterward, the surgeon who saved your son's life, she exists because of what you took from me. I channeled every ounce of pain and anger and helplessness into becoming someone who could heal instead of hurt. So in a twisted way, I suppose I should thank you." "Don't," Tyler whispered. "Please don't thank me for that." "I'm not." Olivia's voice was cold. "I'm simply stating a fact. You set me on a path I never would have chosen, but it led me to become someone who can give children like Tommy a chance at life. That has to count for something." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 15 years hanging between them. "I know I have no right to ask this," Tyler said finally, "but is there anything I can do? Any way I can make amends? I'll turn myself in if you want. I'll face whatever consequences." "And leave Tommy without a father?" Olivia's laugh was bitter. "That boy has been through enough trauma for one lifetime. He doesn't need to discover that his hero is a criminal." "Then what? How do I live with this?" Olivia studied his face, seeing the genuine anguish there. For the first time, she allowed herself to really look at what Tyler had become. Not the arrogant young man who had assaulted her, but a single father who had clearly devoted his life to his son. "You live with it by being the father Tommy needs you to be," she said finally. "You make sure he grows up to be nothing like the man you used to be. You teach him to respect women, to use whatever privilege he has to protect others instead of hurting them." Tyler nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I will. I swear to you. I will." And you never ever tell him what you did. He deserves to believe his father is a good man, and you spend every day of the rest of your life earning that belief. What about justice? What about what I owe you? Olivia was quiet for a long moment, considering. Justice would have been you facing consequences 15 years ago. Justice would have been your uncle not covering up your crimes. Justice would have been me not having to flee my hometown in fear. She paused. But your son almost dying, having to watch him fight for his life while knowing that the person who could save him was someone you'd hurt? I think the universe delivered its own kind of justice. Tyler sank into one of the conference room chairs, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. I'm not forgiving you, Olivia continued. I may never be able to do that, but I'm choosing to let Tommy be more important than my anger. That little boy has nothing to do with your past mistakes, and he deserves every chance at a healthy, happy life. He talks about you constantly, Tyler said quietly. Ever since he woke up, it's been Dr. Hill this and Dr. Hill that. You're his hero. Children are resilient. He'll forget about me soon enough. No, he won't. And neither will I. Tyler looked up at her with something that might have been hope. Would you consider letting us stay in touch? Medical follow-ups, of course, but maybe Tommy would really benefit from having a positive female role model in his life. His mother ... Tyler's voice trailed off. What about his mother? She couldn't handle his medical needs, the constant hospital visits, the uncertainty, the financial stress. She left when he was 3, said she never wanted to be a mother in the first place, especially not to a sick child. Olivia felt a stab of sympathy for Tommy, abandoned by the person who should have protected him most. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating for both of you. It was, but it also showed me what really mattered. Tommy became my whole world. Everything I do, every decision I make, it's all for him. Olivia believed him. She could see it in the way he looked at his son, hear it in the stories he told about their life together. Whatever Tyler had been in the past, his love for Tommy was genuine and transformative. I'll continue to monitor his medical care, she said finally. That's my professional responsibility. Beyond that, she shrugged, we'll see. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. For Tyler, it was more than he'd dared to hope for. 2 weeks later, Tommy was discharged from the hospital with a clean bill of health and strict instructions about activity restrictions during his recovery. Olivia watched from her office window as Tyler helped his son into their car, Tommy clutching a new teddy bear the nurses had given him as a going-away present. Her desk was covered with thank you cards, dozens of them from families whose children she'd treated over the years. But tucked among them was Tommy's crayon drawing of a heart, which she'd had framed. Looking at it, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years, a sense of closure. Tyler Jones would never be forgiven for what he'd done to her. The trauma of that night would always be part of her story. But watching him with his son, seeing the man he'd become, she realized that healing didn't always require forgiveness. Sometimes it simply required choosing love over hate, hope over despair. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Thank you for giving us our life back. Tyler. Attached was a photo of Tommy at home, grinning widely as he showed off his surgical scar to a stuffed animal. Below that, another message. P.S. Tommy wants to know if you like chocolate chip cookies. He's determined to bake some for you. Despite herself, Olivia smiled. She typed back a simple response. Tell him I love chocolate chip cookies, and make sure he follows his activity restrictions. 3 dots appeared immediately then. He says that means you have to come over to try them. Fair warning, he's very persistent. Olivia stared at the message for a long moment. The professional thing to do would be to maintain appropriate boundaries, to keep her relationship with the Jones family strictly medical. But Tommy's innocent joy, his complete lack of knowledge about the complicated history between the adults in his life, made such boundaries feel artificial. We'll see, she typed back. Focus on his recovery for now. Always. And Dr. Hill, thank you for seeing the person I've become instead of just the person I used to be. Olivia set down her phone and returned to the stack of patient files on her desk. Outside her window, the city bustled with afternoon traffic. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, most of them blissfully unaware of the small dramas playing out in hospital rooms and conference chambers. She thought about Tommy's question. Can people really change? Looking at Tyler with his son, seeing the profound love and dedication there, she'd begun to believe the answer might be yes. Not everyone, not easily, and not without real consequences for their past actions. But perhaps under the right circumstances, with the right motivation, even someone who had committed unforgivable acts could become someone worthy of a second chance. It wasn't forgiveness. She might never be capable of that. But it was something else, something that felt like the beginning of peace. And for now, that was enough. 6 months later, Olivia would attend Tommy's 6th birthday party, watching him blow out candles with the lung capacity his repaired heart now allowed. She would see Tyler helping other single parents navigate the medical system, using his own experience to guide families through crisis. She would witness his transformation continue, day by day, choice by choice. And gradually, without ever speaking the words aloud, she would come to understand that sometimes the most profound healing happens not through justice or revenge, but through the simple act of choosing life over death, hope over despair, and love over hate. The surgeon's hands that had repaired Tommy's heart had also, in their own way, begun to repair something broken in herself. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful surgery of all.